So let us start. And my name is Uwe Brandis, and I'm professor at Georgetown University. I'd like to welcome everyone to this concluding session of the International Practices of Place Management through Multi-Sector Partnerships, Urban Thinkers Campus. I'll explain what all of this is in a minute. I'd just like to welcome everyone. And let me start by giving an overview of what we're going to be doing this morning. We're going to start with a short introduction this morning, and we'll be joined by Greg Clark. We'll have a conversation with him. We'll move forward into our first panel, which kind of reviews and reflects upon the various case studies that we completed this fall. And looking forward to hearing from very special guests. We're going to move on to another one-on-one conversation with Christopher Lineberger to explore the economics of place. And then we're going to finish with the town hall panel, which will be an open discussion from 11 to 12 with key partners that we've been working on this project with. Then I'll just offer some concluding remarks. I know it sounds like a long time, but it's going to fly. We've got a lot of different speakers, different perspectives, and really exciting content to explore. So let me just start off by thanking all of the partners that have worked with us on this Urban Thinkers Campus. And let me just explain what this Urban Thinkers Campus is. So this entire endeavor this fall has grown out of a global partnership that we at Georgetown University have entered into with the United Nations Habitat World Urban Campaign Program. And so we've become a designated partner of the World Urban Campaign. And as part of that partnership is the opportunity to convene a thought leadership exercise on any subject. And we propose to focus on place management. And we'll get into the content a little bit more in a second. But this is essentially a thought leadership opportunity to explore issues associated with the new urban agenda and the implementation of the new urban agenda. Talk about that a little bit more in a second. The Urban Thinkers Campus and the approach that we've taken is not to organize a traditional conference, one-day conference where, people clear their entire day and travel to Washington to participate in the conference, but rather to organize this conference in an asynchronous manner over multiple periods of engagement over the course of these last 3 months. And again, I'd like to thank all of our partners who've helped us organize these conversations. In no particular order, definitely like to thank Placemaking X, a global network of placemaking leaders. The International Downtown Association, this is an association that organizes downtowns and downtown revitalization around the world. The Institute of Place Management, very special thank you to them. A very important organization that is the steward of the academic journal, which is focused and has a dedicated focus on place and place management. I would like to thank the New York University Marin Institute of Urban Management for their help and facilitation and thought leadership, and we'll be hearing from Tim Tompkins in the final panel. The Urban Land Institute, both here locally in Washington, D.C. and the global office. Amaken, and Spaces for Souls. These are smaller organizations that have helped us convene the workshops. All of this work is only possible through the support of the Verizon Corporation that underwrites the Georgetown Global Cities Initiative. So a big thank you to everybody. So I want to start with some framing remarks before we start our conversations this morning. And that is to start really with the new urban agenda that was crafted in the years leading up to 2016 and adopted in Quito in 2016. And Article 53 is very clear. It says, we commit ourselves to promoting safe, inclusive, accessible, green, and quality public spaces as drivers of social and economic development. This is really kind of at the core of our interest here today. You know, this is very clearly codified in the new urban agenda. And you know, a lot of the conversations we've had all fall, it's really kind of unpacking this. How does a specific place and the public realm and public activities associated with that place become an actual tool to promote social and economic development? So place we can think of as a territory, as a geography, but we can also think of it as a kind of a field of governance. And a lot of our conversations have been about these place management organizations. I'll talk about those in a moment. But these place management organizations are often vehicles of governance, but not necessarily a direct expression of government. And so just making that distinction between how places are organized and the vehicles and frameworks that are established to help them be organized is in many cases, not all, but in many cases, different from the traditional jurisdiction of a government. So we just make that distinction as we enter into these conversations today. These organizations typically either provide urban services or they also have missions associated with their place to advance the public good in some way. And we'll hear more reflections on those different expressions of mission as we have this conversation. And typically these organizations in the past, at least, you know, have provided certain kinds of services, whether that be the kind of organization and facilitation of local stakeholders, or whether it is the delivery of sanitation or public safety, identity and wayfinding, making places more beautiful through tactical beautification, and then in some cases, you know, marketing the place and helping the place grow, and certainly events and social programming and the practice of placemaking. Our focus in these conversations has not been on narrowly the practice of placemaking, but this kind of larger organization and management of these activities to enable placemaking to occur. We know there are many of these organizations that exist. In North America, we know there are thousands distributed across many different cities. And we know that these organizations exist around the world. And there are some concentrations of professional practice in these countries, but there are so many others, and we'll hear from many others today. So there are many different expressions of what these place management organizations are. One that is very familiar and people may have some name recognition around this, and that is the organization as a business improvement district. And so certainly those fall into the category. But there are also other kinds of public-private partnerships. There are government districts, main streets, kind of at a smaller scale, more localized scale. There are private urban places, places that are completely private, but still serve a public function. So that's kind of an interesting category. We'll hear in a moment from an organization which is not a business improvement district, but a community improvement district. And so this idea of communities organizing around place is very, very important and interesting. Other kinds of civic partnerships, even university districts. We have an example of one of them today, and other kinds of either large parks or cultural districts that have dedicated place management organizations behind them. So the point of the slide is just to illustrate there are many, many different expressions of a place management organization. So I just wanted to start with just a little bit of theory, and that is that if we go to any place in any city, there's always a tension between the reality of that place and the ideal that we want that place to be. There's always a gap. Very rarely are we fully satisfied with our urban places. There's always an interest in improving them, making them more hospitable, more habitable, and better serve the needs of civil society. On the other hand, we know many of these places, and we think we know many of these places, but really kind of understanding the kind of empirical data associated with these places is a challenge in and of itself. And so learning about these places, understanding these places, better being able to describe the assets and performance of these urban places is a challenge in and of itself. We can guess, we think we know, but then there's a kind of empirical process that's embedded in many of these place management organizations to really know what is going on in that place. And what is so interesting about these two sets of ideas is that there becomes an opportunity, and this opportunity is really advanced by these place management organizations to foster a place-based practice that assesses how this place is transitioning from its reality to an ideal, and how data is being collected to understand how to both help in that transition and indeed to manage that transition to the to meet goals and to meet aspirations associated with that place. Coming into this Urban Thinkers campus, we know that many people and many professionals acknowledge that there's a need to broaden and expand the ways in which we describe, understand, and assess urban places, with much greater attention to social inclusion, equitable prosperity. And we heard in the opening session from Professor Sheila Foster around environmental justice and social justice issues associated with place. There's a great interest now in how the built environment affects our health. So interest in population health and how people are thriving or facing challenges to thrive in urban places. And then, no different than any other area of policymaking, enormous new challenges associated with climate change. How do we mitigate it? And of course, we're convening here today during a period of time when the United Nations is convened in Dubai for the COP28. So it's not just mitigating, often at the place level, there's also intense interest in how to adapt to rising temperatures or to drought or to rainfall. So climate change is a major issue for many PMOs. And then finally, kind of understanding the performance of institutional governance, of how these organizations actually work, what their capability is, how they can grow capacity. And much of our conversation today, I think, will be in that arena of how these organizations can do even better than they are already doing. We've organized a set of guiding questions that we established coming into the Urban Thinkers Campus. The first really being about governance, about this kind of expression of partnership across sectors of the society, so whether that be public, private, or philanthropy. And so how are these organizations organized, and how do they provide the vessel for different sectors of society to come together? The second question is more about the process of research and data, and how are these organizations collecting information and data and producing knowledge about their urban place, and how are they using that to inform their activities. So this is really around the idea of performance management. And then thirdly, and this question was developed in direct coordination with UN Habitat, there is this question about, how does this all fit into the larger frameworks of societal goals and indeed of global goals associated with the Sustainable Development Goal framework. And so, there may be definitions of success established locally, but how do those definitions of success and how do those missions relate to the larger goals associated with the SDGs? So this is kind of like the organizing questions that we've asked ourselves as we've started this process. We've had lots of different engagements. We have engaged a lot of different organizations, including the World Bank and the other partners that I mentioned earlier. Each of them have their own global networks associated with place management. We've had these wonderful workshops over the course of the fall, and we'll be hearing from some of the voices from these workshops in a few minutes. In South Africa, in Qatar, amazing session with the Institute of Place Management in the UK. And we had a dedicated set of workshops in New York City, organized by the Marin Institute. And so as kind of a conclusion to this introduction, here are the kind of high-level working findings, and they're working findings. We look forward to refining these as we go. But the first is that these place management organizations are the embodiment of cross-sector partnerships. These organizations have an explicit mission of bringing different stakeholders together in the advancement of their mission. And this is really important as we situate this conversation in larger conversations associated with policymaking, and goals associated with the developing more capacity or growing civil society. These organizations are terribly important, and policymakers who are interested in cross-sector partnerships should really embrace and focus on place management organizations. So that's kind of a working finding number one. Secondly, there is a intense curiosity that these place management organizations embody, that is focused on these places and the stakeholders that use these places. And this curiosity is often very tailored and very specific, and has led to a kind of an organic diversity of different kinds of data collection methodologies. So these organizations collect data in many, many, many different ways, and that directly informs how they manage their practices and their activities to meet their goals. And so this intensity of wanting to know what's going on, wanting to understand how their places really function, and how their stakeholders can be empowered, and how they can benefit from the strategic nature of an urban place is core to the second finding. And then third, while on the one hand, we've found that there are very few, in fact, we haven't really even found one place management organization that is explicitly tracking the sustainable development goals at the scale of their place. On the other hand, the work of place management organizations is utterly essential to achieving the sustainable development goals. And we've heard so many different important testimonials from individual place management organizations about how their goals that they have defined at a local level align with and support the achievement of the sustainable development goals at a broader societal and even at a global level. So the PMOs are really core to achieving this broader vision that we have globally in advancing sustainable development.